You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
So there are 20 categories of financial entities and what they call third-party ICTs. And what they have to do is they have to adhere to these specific requirements around resilience and operational continuity. And this regulation is really about safeguarding all of their internal operations and making sure that it's protecting the broader financial ecosystem. But the most important thing I tell my clients about DORA is it's going to build trust of your customers, partners, and definitely the regulators.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caveat, N2K CyberWire's privacy, surveillance, law, and policy podcast. I'm Dave Bittner, and joining me is my co-host Ben Yellen from the University of Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security. Hey there, Ben.
Hello, Dave.
On today's show, Ben discusses two key court cases that went against Google. I've got the story of a judge ruling that cell tower warrants are unconstitutional. And later in the show, my conversation with Ivani Desai, CEO of Shellman. We're talking about what we can expect now that the Digital Operational Resilience Act is in effect. While this show covers legal topics and Ben is a lawyer, the views expressed do not constitute legal advice. For official legal advice on any of the topics we cover, please contact your attorney. All right, Ben, let's jump right into our stories here. It's been a busy week for Google, huh?
Yeah, if you think you had a tough week, imagine being the attorneys for Google.
Right.
So let's start with a decision that came out last week as we're recording this. And this was a decision relating to an alleged advertising monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
Judge Leonie Brinkema of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia said in a ruling that Google had broken the law to build its dominance over the largely invisible system of technology that places advertisements on pages across the web. Which is why, if I'm searching sports scores, eventually I'll see ads on CNN.com for sports memorabilia.
Right.
I think we've all had that experience.
Sure.
The government argued that Google had a monopoly over three different parts of the online advertising market. So the tools used by online publishers, like news sites, to host open ad space, so the things that show up on the side of your screen, the tools advertisers use to buy that ad space, and then the software that facilitates those transactions. The one portion of this decision that did not go against Google was the latter. So there was not enough evidence to show that Google engaged in anti-competitive practices as it related to the software facilitating actual transactions where companies are purchasing online advertising.
Okay.
But these first two tools, Google, according to this judge, has engaged in monopolization, and there are going to be consequences that are to be determined. So the tools used by online publishers to host open ad space, the tools advertisers use to buy that ad space, Google is going to face some type of repercussion around those two things.
Do we have insights from the judge on the rationale for why they decided that this was so?
So a couple of things. The judge said that it's not simply that they have the largest market share of advertising. It's the specific anti-competitive practices that they take. So the general practice of forcing publishers to only use the company's tools to manage ad space and also to use their products to facilitate all transactions with advertisers. So you have a monopolistic market because most people use Google as a search engine. And then you have the anti-competitive practices of Google forcing companies to use Google's own tools to manage the ads that go up on their website. So using the Google Ads platform as a way to decrease product quality and harm competition by entrenching Google as the dominant company in open web display advertising. It's very analogous to the way that app stores have forced app developers to be locked into the specifics of the Apple Store and the Google Store, which was a subject of a separate lawsuit attacking Google.
Right.
So it's not just that they have market domination. That's not enough to prove that they've engaged in anti-competitive practices. It's that by forcing companies to use their own advertising platform and making it exceedingly difficult to have advertisements on a web page without using that platform, that is an anti-competitive practice. What Google argued unpersuasively in front of this judge is that Google is just the best innovator when it comes to ad placement on websites. Their attorney basically stated that they've created a superior product. It's easy to use because of the ubiquitousness of Google searches. It is the most profitable method to get your advertising on the front page of key websites. I think if the allegations were limited to those specific facts, I think Google might have fared better in court. But the fact that they took these anti-competitive practices to lock people into using their own software, I think that was the determining factor here. So some broader lessons to take away. One, we don't know exactly how the judge is going to enforce this ruling. Both parties have been instructed to submit their recommended timeline for further adjudication in this case. It could be the results could be anything from monetary penalties to forcing Google to break up in some way. Whether that would be selling Chrome or God knows a bunch of other things that would cut away at Google's domination of the search engine market and, relevant here, the advertising market. The other is that the Justice Department under Donald Trump went full speed ahead in adjudicating this case. They brought one of their best appellate attorneys into the courtroom. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, lauded the result of this case, saying this is part of the administration's broader efforts to cut against big tech monopolization, which I think is somewhat of a pleasant surprise for people who are opposed to this type of market consolidation. The Trump administration had kind of a mixed record in his first term on going after antitrust violations. And because the instinct of Trump himself is to kind of go against what the previous administration did in all facets, there was a fear, if not a belief, that the Trump administration would abandon these efforts as it related
and also be pro-business, right? I mean, I'm sure people who are suffering under the tariff regime would contend with the argument that he's pro-business. But yeah, he has a reputation of being an anti-regulation, pro-business, traditional Republican in that sense. Yeah.
But that was not the case here. I think it's very interesting that the Justice Department is moving full speed ahead with this case, and that the judge here will have an opportunity at some point in the next year to force changes to Google's business. And we'll just have to see exactly what those changes are. So that's one case. There was a separate case that was adjudicated last year, where we're now into the second portion of the proceedings. So the Justice Department said yesterday, as we're recording this, that the best way to address Google's monopoly, as a court found last August, in the internet search market would be to reshape the technology giant and alter the power players in Silicon Valley. A judge in that case, that is Amit Mehta from the District Court for the District of Columbia, ruled last year that Google had broken antitrust laws to maintain its dominance in the online search market. And now we're at the portion of the proceedings where the government and the company will haggle in court over how to fix Google's monopoly. And the judge is expected to order prophylactic measures, referred to as remedies here, by the end of the summer. The government is putting its best foot forward here. They are arguing that Google should sell the Chrome web browser, which drives users to its search engine, and that the company needs to take steps to give competitors a leg up in the search engine market. If the court truly wants to restore competition to this market for online searches. A really interesting quote from the Justice Department lawyer who was present for these proceedings is that they are not there for a Pyrrhic victory. It is time for this court, in his words, to tell Google and all other monopolists who are out there listening that there are consequences when you break antitrust laws. For their part, Google said that that the judge in this case should construe the ruling narrowly and prevent significant world-altering remedies here. They said that the court should look only at a group of deals that the company makes with competitors like Apple, Mozilla, Samsung, etc., to make Google the automatic search engine in web browsers and smartphones. That would be a acceptable remedy for Google, given that they already lost this case. I don't think they would concede that that was monopolistic behavior, but now that they've lost, I think this is their way to kind of save face and to prevent far greater consequences.
And if you're Apple, it could be a big hit to them because it's something, what is it, like $5 billion a year Google pays them to be the default search engine choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge part. It's a huge part of Google's revenue. A significant portion, it's a significant portion of their revenue is arranging these deals.
Yeah,
where they get money to be the default search engine, and everybody's happy because people use Google anyway.
Right.
So we have these two cases where our courts are finally, for the first time in a long time, maybe since the late 90s Microsoft cases, really taking a hatchet to the alleged monopolies in Silicon Valley, and it could change the way Silicon Valley works. If Google is forced to break up its ad technology, to break up its monopoly on search engines, we also talked about a couple of years ago, they lost an antitrust suit brought by Fortnite, which accused Google of violating competition laws within the Play App Store. If they lose all of these cases, this could really cut away at Google's market share. And I don't want to say it's going to be an existential impact on Google, but certainly it will have a major financial impact and will change Google's place in the Silicon Valley ecosystem.
Where does Google stand in terms of their opportunities to appeal?
So first, you have to have a judge determine a remedy, which hasn't happened in either of these cases. So appeals are not ripe. They would be interlocutory appeals, which are not ripe at this period. Once the remedies have been given by the judges, and we'll get the first remedy at some point in a few months on the search engine case, then Google would have an opportunity to file an appeal. An appeal is going to be expensive. I'm sure Google can afford it. But it's also, the district court did the yeoman's work of having these really full trials with tons of different witnesses. I think the trial for the search engine case went on for a period of months. So there was a lot of intense fact-finding. And it's just going to be hard for an appeals court, which didn't go through that fact-finding operation, to say that there was an obvious error as a matter of law. Which is what they would have to find to overturn the case. So if I were a prognosticator, now who knows? Appeals court judges can do whatever they want, pretty much, unless they're overturned by the Supreme Court. But if I were a betting man, I would say that appeals probably aren't going to work. And depending on what the remedies are, Google just might want to cut their losses and abide by those remedies.
You know, I mean, looking back on previous antitrust cases like Microsoft, I think, is it fair to say a lot of people feel that in the end, you know, Microsoft didn't really get hit that hard? They got some fines and so on and so forth, but things overall kind of went Microsoft's way?
Yeah, I mean, let's think about it. I purchased a MacBook Air, and did I use their in-house applications for spreadsheets and for word processing? No, I did not. I downloaded the Microsoft suite because their products still have certain cachet. And they do have functionality that's genuinely, I think, superior to the alternatives. And I think that's true for a lot of different Microsoft applications as well. The uniqueness of that case was its placement in time, the fact that there were such significant protests around it. It was kind of a backlash against the consolidation of the industry. But yeah, in the long run, last I checked, Microsoft's still doing pretty well as a company. Its products are still selling. And yeah, I don't think the impact was...
They're not up against the ropes.
They're not. Now, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with Google. It really depends on how strong these remedies are and how strong the judges are, or how far the judges are willing to go in forcing them to change anti-competitive practices. If it's just get rid of these deals to make yourself the default internet browser, I think that's manageable for Google. Apple has a default map service. I don't know if you use Apple Maps.
I do not.
I do not either.
I tend to use Waze.
Oh, you use Waze. Okay, you want to be yelled at about all of the traffic in your area that you need to avoid. I use Google Maps, and I use them because I already had a kind of brand loyalty to them, and I just think it's a better product.
Yeah.
And that's probably the same thing that would happen. I would open up Safari in my phone, and it would bring me to whatever the alternative Apple search engine is. And I'd be like, you know what? I'm kind of missing Google. Maybe I'll just download it. And I think that would be true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The other wrinkle here is we're entering a new era where companies are competing over AI software. And so this might have an impact on Google's market share in AI.
Right.
A lot of the experimentation with AI comes from Google's alleged monopoly over, well, I guess we can say it's a monopoly since it was found to be in a district court. But the monopoly over search engines, that's the way that Gemini, Google's AI platform, is collecting all of its information and spitting out AI search results when we put something in the search bar.
Yeah.
So I think it could have an impact on that market, especially as they're facing really intense competition in the AI field. We have competitors such as Grok, we have ChatGPT. Apple is also a market player in this as well as Microsoft. So
Meta has their Llama open source thing.
Yeah, exactly. Not to mention the Chinese are developing perhaps superior AI services that we need to compete with as well. So it could certainly have an impact on those markets, even if the overall impact isn't particularly severe.
It's an interesting point. It reminds me, I think history has shown that none of these tech giants are unassailable. You know, you look at how Microsoft missed out on mobile.
Right.
You know, they just blew
dropped the ball.
They just, yeah. And so they certainly were in a good position to dominate mobile devices, but for whatever reason, they didn't take it seriously enough or didn't think things were going in that direction to the degree that they were. And so, you know, who has the two mobile platforms? Apple and Google.
Yeah.
It's conspicuous. Microsoft's absence is conspicuous.
It sure is. Has Google missed out on anything yet? I mean, I feel like...
Well, but that's my point with AI, that this is the next wave, and they're going to be winners and losers. And so, you know, previous domination in things like search, which Google had and still has, as people shift to more AI-driven information gathering, who knows who will take the lead here?
Yeah, maybe Gemini will go the way of Google Glass and Google Reader.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, time will tell. All right, well, we will have a link to those stories in the show notes. We will be right back after this message from our show sponsor. Secure access is crucial for U.S. public sector missions, ensuring that only authorized users can access certain systems, networks, or data. Are your defenses ready? Cisco's Security Service Edge delivers comprehensive protection for your network and users. Experience the power of zero trust and secure your workforce wherever they are. Elevate your security strategy by visiting cisco.com/go.sse. That's cisco.com/go/sse. All right, so my story this week comes from the folks over at 404 Media, and more specifically, Joseph Cox, who we owe a great debt of gratitude for reporting on all these things.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of content from Mr. Cox over the years.
Right. That's right. And this is about a federal judge in Nevada that has ruled that tower dumps, which are the collection of cell phone data from specific cell towers, this judge ruled that they violate the Fourth Amendment. And this is the first time that a court within the Ninth Circuit has addressed the constitutionality of tower dumps. In this case, law enforcement used a tower dump to gather data from over 1,600 devices connected to a cell tower during a specific time frame. And they were building a case against a gentleman named Corey Spurlock, who faces charges related to a murder-for-hire plot and marijuana distribution. And Mr. Spurlock's defense argued that the tower dump constituted an unconstitutional search, and a U.S. District Judge Miranda Dew agreed, stating that the warrant resembled a general warrant, which is prohibited under the Fourth Amendment. She declined to suppress the evidence, citing the good faith exception. Explain that to us.
That is law enforcement's favorite tool. So basically, there had never been a Ninth Circuit ruling on the question of tower dumps.
Yeah.
So law enforcement, using their good faith, believed that that type of search was legal. So we don't want to withhold evidence as a prophylactic measure if they were acting in good faith based on what they believed the law to be.
Oh.
This is kind of an all-purpose law enforcement tool. They bring up the good faith exception, even if the search is unconstitutional, because from the view of the judicial branch, the reason to apply the exclusionary rule to exclude pieces of evidence is to disincentivize bad behavior. But if law enforcement is acting in good faith, that's not bad behavior. So that's the rationale of allowing the case to continue or allowing a conviction to stand, even if the primary mode of a search and seizure ended up being unconstitutional. It's of course, is of no comfort to the named party in this case, because that person is still going to have a prison sentence. So they get no comfort knowing, like, hey, actually, this search was unconstitutional, but it doesn't matter in your case.
Because law enforcement believed that it was constitutional because there'd been no prior ruling in this circuit.
They had no reason to believe otherwise. So now, if a future law enforcement agency within the Ninth Circuit, so generally states along the West Coast, now that you have this as binding precedent, especially if it's upheld by the appeals court, then law enforcement cannot say to have been acting in good faith if they do this again.
Yeah.
But as it applies to the previous case, they were acting in good faith.
Okay. Well, this article points out that this particular ruling in Nevada aligns with a similar decision made by a federal judge in Mississippi earlier this year. And the Department of Justice has appealed the Mississippi decision, which, of course, could put them on a collision course with the Supreme Court, right?
Absolutely. So now we have two separate courts in very different parts of the country saying that tower dumps, where you collect all of the cell phones that were in a particular location at a particular time, that those are unconstitutional because they are too similar to general warrants that are not specific, not based on articulable facts. So yeah, I think this could definitely be on a collision course to make it to the United States Supreme Court. I think the Supreme Court would do a service to the country in clarifying this question. The Justice Department has used tower dumps in a lot of cases, most famously probably for the January 6th cases.
Oh, really?
Which I'm not sure if this Justice Department is going to be as gung ho about that, given its political disposition. But a lot of law enforcement agencies across the country use tower dumps. The question is, can tower dumps ever be constitutional? Because the Fourth Amendment says you have to specify the place to be searched, the person to be searched, or the things to be seized.
Yeah.
And almost by definition, a tower dump is not doing that. You don't have at that point, you don't have probable cause that a particular individual committed that crime.
Right.
So you're trying to just use this as an investigatory step.
Mm-hmm.
One of our favorite academic scholars, Professor Oren Kerr, has proposed an approach that would allow for constitutional tower dumps.
Really?
Yeah, I think in his view, it has to do with the particulars of the case. If you can make the parameters sufficiently narrowed where it's analogous to somebody who could see a criminal in physical proximity to the location of a crime in a similar time period, then that can be sustained as a constitutional tower dump. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
It doesn't. Go
Great.
on.
Check me on my nonsense. So imagine there's a bank robbery, right?
Right. Okay.
A certain number of people generally would be in the proximity of that bank robbery to physically see somebody fleeing the scene.
Right.
Or to physically be present when they could hear bank tellers yelling and calling law enforcement.
Yes.
That's a very brief period, right?
Okay,
So
sure.
an hour later or 2 hours later, the scene is going to be very different. You're not going to have hundreds of police cars. You're not going to have a suspect fleeing with a bag of money and a mask or whatever.
Right. A black and white striped shirt and wearing a beret.
Yeah, that's how it's portrayed in the comic books.
Right.
I think what Professor Kerr is saying is if you can limit tower dumps temporally and physically to just that location and just that time where somebody would be able to observe the crime physically, then that is sufficient as a constitutional search.
So the security cameras at the bank show that the robbery happened at 12:04 p.m. And if we go to the tower dump and say, I need, between 12:03 and 12:06, that might narrow it enough to have it be constitutional?
Right, exactly. So then every single one of these tower dumps is going to be context-based.
Yeah.
So is it overbroad? Is it beyond what a pre-digital law enforcement agent or passerby in the 1950s would have been able to see at the scene of a crime if they were a physical witness to the actual event? I think that is the rationale here. That's kind of updating the existing law to be commensurate with the digital technology. Law enforcement is not going to like that. I mean, it's better from their perspective than not having the tower dump tool at all.
Right.
But it would certainly be limiting because sometimes there are very relevant facts that occur outside that immediate period. It might be extremely helpful to figure out who was there 3 days before scouting out the bank. And maybe you could get there by doing a tower dump of the 5 minutes where the bank robbery took place, figuring out all the devices within that period. And then if you have 2 or 3 devices, you could do individualized searches with warrants to get the location data of those suspects.
Is it plausible that if the Supreme Court takes this, that they would outline that kind of specificity?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as an aside, the Supreme Court hasn't taken up a Fourth Amendment case since Carpenter, which is now going on 7 years. So we're kind of out of practice in evaluating this particular Supreme Court on its Fourth Amendment jurisprudence.
Okay.
I'll note that since we had the Carpenter case, there are 2 new justices on the Supreme Court. And by the time this case makes it to the Supreme Court, there might be 3 or 4 new justices. So it's kind of a shot in the dark. But I do think this is a common way of adopting historical jurisprudence to account for changes in technology. It's maintaining the same level of capabilities from law enforcement that existed prior to a technology like tower dumps being invented. And that could be a good frame for which the Supreme Court could view this issue.
All right. Well, interesting stuff. We will have a link to that story in the show notes. And of course, we would love to hear from you. If there's something you'd like us to cover on the show, you can email us. It's caveat@n2k.com. What's the common denominator in security incidents? Escalations and lateral movement. When a privileged account is compromised, attackers can seize control of critical assets. With bad directory hygiene and years of technical debt, identity attack paths are easy targets for threat actors to exploit, but hard for defenders to detect. This poses risk in Active Directory, Entra ID, and hybrid configurations. Identity leaders are reducing such risks with attack path management. You can learn how attack path management is connecting identity and security teams while reducing risk with Bloodhound Enterprise, powered by SpecterOps. Head to specterops.io today to learn more. SpecterOps. See your attack paths the way adversaries do. Ben, I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Avani Desai, who is CEO of Shellman, and we are talking about what folks can expect now that the Digital Operational Resilience Act, DORA, is in effect. Here's my conversation with Avani Desai.
So I think the best way to first say is DORA is not just another regulatory hurdle. It's actually a very strategic imperative. So financial entities and all of their technology providers that because they're facing a lot of cyber risk just because of the industry that they're in, what DORA does is it goes beyond traditional compliance measures and it's enforcing a framework that strengthens, and this is a real key word, is resilience. And it makes sure that there's operational continuity and that it really fortifies the financial sector against any type of what I call systemic disruptions that can happen from a cyber attack. So there are 20 categories of financial entities and what they call third-party ICTs. And what they have to do is they have to adhere to these specific requirements around resilience and operational continuity. And this regulation is really about safeguarding all of their internal operations and making sure that it's protecting the broader financial ecosystem. But the most important thing I tell my clients about DORA is it's going to build trust of your customers, partners, and definitely the regulators.
And to be clear here, this is an EU regulation?
DORA is specifically to the UK.
To the UK, okay. So what are some of the specifics here that organizations need to worry about to be compliant?
Yeah. So there's what we call core requirements under DORA. The first one is organizations have to establish and maintain a framework that helps you identify, assess, and mitigate risks. And these frameworks have to be continuously updated because, there's going to be new risks that come in, if there's AI and there's a new emerging technology. So all of these risks have to be updated. And this framework has to evolve and has to have executive oversight. So that's the first one. The second thing is incident reporting. So if there's any significant incident, one, you have to make sure that you report it promptly. You got to make sure that the reporting includes all the details, like what was the nature of it, what was the cause, and then what was the impact. And the goal of this, of course, is to improve the transparency, but at the same time, make sure that your response times are much quicker. And so you prevent any type of cascading failure. The third is regular resilience testing. And so the best way for resilience testing is vulnerability assessments, pen testing, making sure that you're doing scenario-based simulations. All of this is to make sure that you're validating the security measures and the strength of your organization. The fourth topic in DORA is third-party risk management, which I think is really important, especially in today's world where organizations are always using third parties, and sometimes your third parties are using third parties. So what financial institutions have to do is make sure that their third-party providers comply also with the DORA resilience standard, reinforcing security throughout the entire supply chain. We've seen so many supply chain issues, definitely the last 5 years. And the last is, which I like this because I've never seen this in a framework before. It's making sure that you're being good stewards and your information sharing. So organizations are encouraged to share cyber threat intelligence across all the different sectors, because what DORA is saying is, as a collective, we're going to have strength and we want to make sure that we defense and we mitigate against any emerging technology. So if one organization knows about something, well, they should share it with the next organization.
And what has been the reaction so far from industry since this has gone into effect?
Yeah. I think, well, one, any type of framework or, anything that is mandated is not always taken best, right? Especially because the key milestones, like the timeline. So this actually was officially published January 16th, 2023. And then full compliance, which is now required, actually, it started getting required January 17th, 2025. So in 2 years, you had a lot to do, right? I mean, I talked about those 5 core requirements under DORA. But when I talk to a lot of organizations that are providing services to the bank, there's a couple of things that they're really excited about. One, as a global community, they are happier that this is going to allow them to increase their cybersecurity posture, right? So organizations going through DORA, because it has that resiliency, which most frameworks haven't had in the past, they have to make this structured and disciplined approach of how to mitigate risk. And that increases overall security. So I think that's one thing that we're seeing a reaction to. The second thing is our clients are telling us meeting DORA actually allows them to align with a lot of regulatory expectations. And that is reducing the likelihood of additional audits and sanctions and fines because DORA is a robust, kind of all-encompassing framework. And the third, which I actually never thought of when I think about frameworks, but we have a couple of clients who said that they're going through DORA because they actually want to have a competitive advantage and open up their market share. And so they're proactively complying because they want to have a strategic edge in the market and they want to deliver to these financial entities.
That's interesting. So what are the reporting requirements here? How is the UK government making sure that folks are keeping up with this?
Yeah, so the reporting requirements, there's a couple of things that you're going to have to do. One is now, as of January 17th, you have to have those couple of things in place, right? You're going to have to make sure that you have a gap assessment. It can be done internally. You have to make sure that you have a cybersecurity risk program. You have to make sure that you have pen testing and so forth. And look, you don't have to submit this. This isn't like FedRAMP or something. But what you have to do is these banks that you'll be working with will ask for it because they're going to want to make sure that they're being strategic when they engage with somebody.
I see. Well, for organizations who are here in the U.S. And either are doing business over there or doing business with folks over there, what sort of things have they had to do to make sure that they're compliant?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I talked about. One, and this should have been done probably a year or 2 years ago, but we do have clients that are continuing to do it right now, is identifying areas where the current cybersecurity measures fall short of DORA requirements, and then either internally using your team to remediate or externally finding an advising company to help you remediate. So the best way, I call it maybe a readiness assessment or a gap assessment when it comes to the DORA requirements. The second is there will be, like I said, DORA is very robust. So it's not like a PCI audit or an ISO audit or SOC audit because it has that resiliency component to it that you need to make sure that you evaluate, and you're probably most likely going to have to improve your organization's cybersecurity maturity to really align with the regulatory expectation. And then also, you typically don't see where you have to have a pen test. FedRAMP was one of the ones in the U.S., which is if you want to work with the U.S. government. The new FedRAMP version, Rev 5, actually says you have to do red teaming. DORA actually says you have to make sure that you have some type of pen testing. So you can do that internally as well, or you can hire a firm to simulate cyber attacks to make sure that there's the right efficacy and the effectiveness of your security controls. And then the hardest part, I really do think this is the hardest part, is making sure that all your vendors, if they're in the ICT, comply with DORA's resilience standards to mitigate the supply chain vulnerabilities. And I think that's going to be very hard. We've actually seen organizations have to drop vendors because they haven't shown that they're meeting the DORA resilience standards. And I think that can cause a little bit of disruption in your organization.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight. And I guess it incentivizes organizations, as you say, to be proactive about this. So if someone asks them if they're DORA compliant, they can say, absolutely, we're ahead of the game here.
Yeah, that's why I really do think that it is a market mover. Like that's why I think a lot of people are proactive about trying to get this done, because they don't want to be dropped, right? They definitely don't want to be dropped by some of these larger, especially, financial institutions.
A few years ago, we saw GDPR kind of leading the way when it came to global privacy. Do we expect that DORA is going to be doing the same sort of thing when it comes to this, or will we see following legislation around the world, maybe even here in the U.S.?
100%. I do say like the EU and the UK really do focus on these regulatory standards. And because so many US corporations are global corporations, that even if we don't have something like this in the US, that because of these mandates, I think of this exactly like GDPR. The other thing I think of this as is like the EU AI Act. We don't have a specific AI framework in the US that mandated by the federal government. But US companies are still doing it. So 100% that we will see this get, well, we're already seeing it. We're already seeing US companies saying, I need to proactively go through risk management, incident reporting, this resilience testing, information sharing, and so forth. So yeah, it's happening. And, DORA also applies to, like I said earlier, 20 different types of financial entities. So it's not just banks, it's actually insurance companies, it's these what I call these ICT providers, which is information and communication technology providers. So that's going to be everything. It's IT infrastructure, software, data management system, communication platform, then these third-party service providers. Like ICT really enables the entire financial world. Like it focuses on everything from processing transactions to like managing customer data.
So interesting stuff, huh, Ben?
Yeah, really interesting conversation. It's just interesting that this is an EU mandate, but it's going to have such an impact on companies in the United States who want to do business overseas. So if you're in the U.S., in reaction to this law, you're going to have to strengthen your resilience, identify vulnerabilities, make sure there are robust safeguards. It's just interesting that this is all in reaction to a foreign law, but that's the way this market works.
Yeah.
We live in a globalized society.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So far.
So far, yeah. At least as we're recording this.
That's right. All right. Well, again, our thanks to Avani Desai from Shellman for joining us. We do appreciate him taking the time. And now, a message from Black Cloak. Did you know the easiest way for cyber criminals to bypass your company's defenses is by targeting your executives and their families at home? Black Cloak's award-winning digital executive protection platform secures their personal devices, home networks, and connected lives. Because when executives are compromised at home, your company is at risk. In fact, over 1/3 of new members discover they've already been breached. Protect your executives and their families 24/7, 365 with Black Cloak. Learn more at blackcloak.io. And that is Caveat, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to caveat@n2k.com. This episode is produced by Liz Stokes. Our executive producer is Jennifer Eiben. The show is mixed by Trey Hester. Peter Kilpie is our publisher. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Ben Yellen.
Thanks for listening.